Church, great to see you. My name's Andy. I'm one of the pastors here, and I love that you're joining us this morning. Jesus, for the third time in the Gospel of Mark, here predicts his death. In fact, not only does he predict his death here, but he actually tells his closest disciples, his closest friends, he says, "Hey guys, here's what you need to know. I'm about to die, and then 3 days later, I'm going to get back up. I'm going to rise again." Which means not only is Jesus actually predicting his death, but he's also predicting his resurrection. He's saying this is what's about to happen. And every time he does this, they just cannot seem to be able to wrap their minds around that. It's like they just don't understand. They hear the words coming out of his mouth, but they cannot understand them. It's kind of the same way, like if you were to tell a toddler, "Hey, mom is going to be right back." It's like they don't have the ability to comprehend you leaving the room and also returning, right? And so what happens? They lose their minds, don't they? They go crazy. They lose it, right? Jesus is telling his disciples here for the third time, I'm going to die. And 3 days later, I'm going to get back up. But then instead of them grieving that, instead of them like asking any questions, follow-up questions, well, okay, what does that mean for us, Jesus? Like, what should we do? How do we need to prepare? The type of questions that any type of normal, thoughtful adult might ask is somebody who we're going to tell you, "Hey, I'm about to die." They don't do any of that, do they? What do they do? Actually, what they do is very unusual because Jesus says, "Hey, I'm about to die," and they respond, "Well, Jesus, we've been thinking," which is not a good sign, is it? Right? It's like when your husband says, "Hey, you know what I've been thinking about this?" It's like, please don't. Like, you don't have to go there, right? They're like, "Jesus, we've been thinking," and he goes, "Okay, what have you been thinking?" "We've been thinking we want to sit on a throne like you're going to sit on a throne. Like we want to be great and powerful like you're going to be great and powerful." And Jesus hears that and he responds to them in the best possible way. He tells them two things in response. He says, one, you don't know what you're asking for. And two, you don't understand what it means to be great. You don't know what you're asking for, and you don't know what it means to be great. Now, I just can't help but wonder if Jesus might be saying that same type of thing to some of us today. What if there was like a certain propensity? Okay, and this is going to sound crazy, but like, what if maybe there was a certain type of propensity in some of us to say, "You know what? I don't really know what I want." Right? It's like I don't really like what I have, but I don't really know what I want. None of us would ever think that way, would we? Right? Or maybe even like the little bit more subtle or sneaky way to think about this is, again, you would never say this out loud, but maybe you would say to yourself, "I know what's best for me," only for that to kind of blow up in your face at some point down the road, right? Or maybe let's take this a little bit step further. All right. Jesus says, "You don't even know what to ask for, and you don't understand what it means to be great." What if it was the case that we don't have a very healthy definition of greatness? Like, what does it mean? Like, what is greatness? What does it mean to be great? Like, what does it mean to, I don't know, like have a great marriage, or to be a great mom, or to be a great dad, or to have a great church, or to be a great leader, or to have a great day? Like, what does it mean to have a great life? All right. Here's what Jesus is doing in Mark chapter 10. He's saying, you don't know what to ask for, and you don't understand what true greatness is, so I'm going to show you. And that's exactly what he does here. Right? Now, here's my hope for us this morning. And look, this comes straight from verse 36 of Mark chapter 10, when Jesus asked a question to his disciples, and it's an important question. It's a very powerful question, right? And like a lot of Jesus's questions, it's not an easy question. It's a simple question, but it's not an easy question. What does he say in verse 36? He says, "What do you want me to do for you? What do you want me to do for you?" Now imagine for a moment if we're all sitting here and Jesus walks through those back doors and he takes a seat next to you. And he just sits down, and after a few minutes he kind of turns over and is like, "Hey, I'm Jesus. What do you want me to do for you?" Again, it's a simple question. Right? Maybe not an easy question, right? How do we respond to that? Because we know, at least from this passage right here, it shows us if the possibility of Jesus's response to us is, "You don't even know what you're asking for, man." It's like, okay, maybe I'll slow down a little bit. Like maybe there'll be a little bit of pause before I answer that question out of Jesus's mouth. What would I say? What am I wanting? What am I asking for? What are you asking for from Jesus? Now here's what I want. I want to be able to answer that question. I want us to be able to answer that question in such a way that Jesus would say, "That's exactly what I was hoping you would ask for." And so, how does that happen? How do we get there? Well, that's what we're going to try to answer today in Mark chapter 10. As we walk through this passage, here's what we're going to see. We're going to see Jesus do two things. One, he's going to show us exactly why he came, why Jesus came. And then, secondly, what true greatness actually looks like. Why Jesus came, and then what true greatness actually looks like. All right. So we'll begin with that first point. Why exactly did Jesus come? And we'll start in verse 32. Look at verse 32 again. It says this, and that's Jesus and his disciples, they were on the road going up to Jerusalem, and Jesus was walking ahead of them, and they were amazed, and those who followed were afraid. All right. Now, this is kind of new. Because typically, when you got Jesus, he's going from place to place. And typically, when this is happening, you've got Jesus kind of in the middle of all of it. You've got these crowds surrounding Jesus. You've got all these people learning from him. He's teaching them, like these crowds surrounding. But it says here, he's out front. It says Jesus was walking ahead of them. I imagine this like the dad at the airport, right? He's on a mission, right? We're getting to that gate. We're going. Like, if the kids are with me or not, we're going. We're going. That's what Jesus is doing here. And it says, what's the response? It says they were amazed, and those who followed were afraid. Two words there. Interesting. They were amazed and they were afraid. Now, why were they amazed? Now, we're not exactly sure. It was probably not like, wow, Jesus, check out that pace. Like, you are a fast walker. Like, I'm so impressed right now. You're making some great time, got some pep in your step. No, I don't think it's that. I think they were amazed because at least some of the crowd understood what was in Jerusalem. Right? Some of the crowd knew what was in store for Jesus. They knew he was not just marching to the throne, he was actually marching to the cross. And they knew that. They're amazed. Like, wow, he is leading the way to his own death. Also says they were afraid. Why were they afraid? Well, maybe it's because if Jesus really was the Messiah that he claimed to be, they're thinking, man, this could get gnarly. Right? If he really is like this Messiah, is he going to like rescue the people of Israel? Like, there could be a war with Rome soon, and this could get really, really bad. See, this entire scene, it just reminds us there was so much confusion about who Jesus actually was and what Jesus came to do. There was so much confusion. I mean, even amongst his disciples, these guys who have been traveling with Jesus for the last 3 years, it was like as many times as he told them, here's what I've come to do, they literally just could not comprehend the words coming out of his mouth. I mean, look what he says in verse 32. And taking the 12, again, these are the 12 disciples, all right? They'll become the 12 apostles soon. Taking the 12 again, he began to tell them what was going to happen to him. All right, and just notice, look how explicit this is. I want you to notice this. Verse 33. He said to them, see, we're going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him over to the Gentiles. And they will mock him, and they will spit on him, and they will flog him, and they will kill him. And after 3 days, he will rise. See, Jesus is telling his disciples here as plainly as he possibly can, I am about to die. In fact, he also takes it a step further. And this time, actually, this is for the very first time. He's not going to just tell them that he's going to die. He's going to tell them why he's going to die. Verse 45. If you skip down to verse 45, you'll see this. Verse 45 is actually like the theme verse of the entire book of Mark. Some people say this is like the key verse to the entire Bible. All right. It's that important. Look what it says in verse 45. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. See, Jesus Christ came not to be served, but to die, to give his life. I don't know if you've ever thought about this before, but this is like one of the things that actually separates Jesus Christ from the founder of almost every other major world religion. All right, every other founder of every other major world religion, kind of exists. Their purpose was to live and set an example. Jesus's purpose was to die and be a sacrifice. Have you ever wondered, why did Jesus have to die? Like, why did he actually have to die? Like, why did he really have to go to the cross? Do we have to go all through all that stuff? And I mean, it's a popular question. It's a very important question. Why did Jesus have to die? I mean, usually the line of reasoning tends to go like, if God really is all loving, right? If God is all powerful, couldn't he just forgive? Couldn't he just say, okay, all is forgiven, all is forgotten, and avoid all that death and all the torture, avoid the cross? Is it really necessary? Maybe you've wondered that before. Certainly you've heard other people ask the question before. So let's think about that for a minute. And here's what I want to do for just a few minutes. I want us to think about, why did Jesus have to die? I want us to think about that from two different angles. I want us to think about that theologically, and I also want us to think about this maybe in a more personal way. We'll start theologically. Jesus says in verse 45, I've come to give my life as a ransom for many. Well, the first thing about that, you see that little word for? He says, he came to be a ransom for many. It's the Greek word anti, which means instead of, in place of. It's a substitute. All right. He gave himself as a ransom instead of, or in place of, many others. And then, well, there's that word ransom. And that word ransom, I mean, that's not a word that we use a whole lot today in English language. It's like the only thing I could think of is like kidnapping. It's like, where else do we use the word ransom? But this was a word that originally meant to purchase the freedom of a slave or a prisoner. All right, so the ransomer would bring a huge sacrificial payment in order to pay off the debt of a slave or the debt of a prisoner in order to procure their freedom. That's the word that's being used here. And that's the kind of ransom that Jesus came to pay. But since the slavery that Jesus is dealing with is a cosmic kind of slavery, Jesus came to deal with a cosmic kind of evil or a cosmic kind of debt. It requires a cosmic payment. Now, I realize right away, for some of you in the room, you're going to think, oh, wait a minute. That feels a little too much. Like, that feels a little intense. Right? That just feels like maybe like one more example of those ancient, primitive, bloodthirsty gods that needs to be appeased by one of those ancient, bloodthirsty, primitive societies, right? Maybe you've seen the movie Odyssey. It's out right now, right? Yeah, you've seen it? Don't worry, I'm not going to spoil it. Although it's been out for 3,000 years. So if you don't know the story by now, that is on you. But if you remember high school English, the prelude to the Odyssey was what? Iliad. That's right, the Iliad. Good job, guys. And what happened in the Iliad? There was King Agamemnon, all right, and he was trying to sail his army to Troy, but he wasn't able to sail the army to Troy because he didn't have any good wind. And so what did he do? He sacrificed his daughter to appease the wrath of the gods. And as soon as he sacrifices his daughter, all of a sudden the winds start blowing again. And some of you think about a story like that, you hear a story like that, and you think, well, how is that too different from Christianity? It feels like the same thing, an angry God that needs to be appeased by a death. If God is all loving, if God is all powerful, why can't he just forgive? Why can't he just forget? Why all the blood? Why the sacrifice? And here, let me give you maybe the beginning of an answer. Right? This is the beginning of the answer, and it's this. All life-changing love is substitutionary sacrifice. All life-changing love is substitutionary sacrifice. What does that mean? Well, you all know what that means. You might not use those exact same words, but you all know the feeling. I'll give you an example. All right, we'll start with, I'll give you a few examples here this morning. I'm going to start with an easy one. I'm going to start with parenting. All right, parenting. Your kids, and I realize not all of you have kids. Statistically, most of you in this room will have kids at some point, but here's what you need to realize. When you have kids, you will learn very quickly, oh my goodness, they are so needy. Right? They are so needy. Like, they need me for everything. They are so dependent on me for everything all the time. In fact, I still remember many, many years ago when my kids were very, very little. and they were young. I was meeting up with a friend of mine who's also a pastor here in the city, and it had been a long time since we caught up, and we were talking. He said, "Andy, man, how you doing? Like, how are the kids?" And I don't know if he just caught me in a rare moment, but I just said, "Man, I'll be honest. They are so needy. Like, I'm exhausted right now. I am so tired. They are so needy." And he looked at me, and here's what he said. I promise you, this is exactly what he told me. He goes, "Isn't that great? Isn't that great?" I mean, it's just, he's a much better pastor than me, okay? He was like, This is a wonderful thing. Like, that's the way that the Lord designed it, for them to be so dependent upon you for every single thing." And I remember just looking at him and thinking, yeah, I don't feel the same. Yes, yeah, you're right. Okay. And that was the feeling of like, yes, they are so needy. Why are they so needy? Because they cannot do anything on their own, can they? And so what do you do about that? How do you deal with that? How do you like raise a child? Well, here's what we all know. They won't just magically grow out of that, will they? The only way that your children grow up into self-sufficient adults and come out of their neediness and come out of their dependency is well, essentially if like the only way that happens is if you drop kick your life for like the next 10 to 15 years, right? It only comes when you're able to say, okay, I have to put all of this on pause. And how does that happen? Well, first of all, give you a few examples. First of all, you just got to read to them and read to them and read to them and read to them. If intellectually you want to see them grow up and develop, right? And you have to read books that are just so boring, right? They're so dumb. Like most, not all of them, but a lot of them, right? Yeah, and I mean, actually, I remember there were times when my kids were really tiny, and you know, you have to read to them. You have to read. All the books tell you have to read to the kids if you want them to grow. And I remember sitting there with some of my kids, and they'd be on my lap, and it'd be so tiring. And it's the end of the night, and I'd pull out one of those board books, and literally we'd read them so many times that I could just close my eyes and just say do it by memory. And I was like, oh, one Sunday morning, the sun popped up, and all of a sudden there's a hungry caterpillar. And on Monday, he ate the apple. And on Tuesday, I was like, what is that? It's just like, you got to do that, right? You got to read to your kids. You got to listen to them, right? You got to listen to them and listen to them and listen to them and listen to them. And it's not the most scintillating conversation that you've ever had, right? Right? It's years before they say things that are that interesting. Right? Now, look, here's my point. Here's my point. Unless you sacrifice your freedom, my kids are in the room, so they're all, I'm going to hear about it later. I know. Here's the point, though. Unless you sacrifice your freedom enormously, right? Unless you sacrifice your time enormously, unless you're willing to not like just disrupt your life, but if not until you're willing to like put your whole life on pause to a great degree, they will not grow up into wholesome and happy individuals contributing to society, right? I mean, here's what happens. You guys have seen this. I mean, this is kind of a sad reality, but there are plenty of parents, plenty of parents who just won't let that happen, right? They won't disrupt their lives that much. They won't pour themselves into their children. They won't make that sacrifice. And what happens to their kids? You know, from the parent who's like, I don't want to give that up. I don't want to give up my way of life. I like my way of life. Well, you know what happens? Those kids, I mean, they get older, but they don't necessarily grow up, do they? Right? They're no longer children, but they kind of are. They're still needy. They're still dependent. What I'm trying to say here in all this is the recognition of you can make the sacrifice or they're going to make the sacrifice, right? Right? Either you stand in the place and make the sacrifice or they will. It's either them or you. There's no other way. You either suffer temporarily in a redemptive way, or they're going to suffer in horrible and very non-redemptive ways later on down the road. It's up to you. But the principle is true either way. All real life-changing love is substitutionary sacrifice. All real life-changing love is substitutionary sacrifice. All right, let me give you another example here. This one is one that we've all felt. Forgiveness. Forgiveness. Imagine if somebody close to you, somebody like very, very personal in your life, imagine if they really, really hurt you. All right, so we've all experienced this. They hurt, they wound you in a really personal way. You know, maybe it was like some kind of great betrayal. Maybe they publicly embarrassed you somehow. What is our most natural response? To make them pay, right? To get even. Or there's something within us. And I mean, this could be like in small ways or big ways, but if somebody hurts you, if somebody like makes you feel a certain way, there's something within us that makes you think, I want you to feel what I just had to feel. Like, I want you to experience what I just experienced, which, and a lot of times, that's not often too difficult to do, is it? Right? You think about some of those relationships, and it's like, all right, you're going to spend the time. I'm going to figure out how to like what is actually. Have you ever had that experience where it's like that happens to you, and then you're driving home, and and you're kind of replaying that conversation, and it's almost like, I wish I would have said this. Like, oh man, I could have really got him if I would have just said that. What is that? That is the desire. Like, I want you to feel what I just felt, and I want you to feel it actually even a little bit worse. Right? I want you to feel. I want you to feel that sting a little bit more. And here's the problem with that. First, you're starting to become the very person that hurts you when you think that way, right? Right. And if there's ever any chance of them being able to see the error in their ways, for them to kind of change course and regroup. I mean, if there's any hope of breaking the cycle, it certainly won't happen by hurting them, will it? I mean, we all know how that plays out. Right, and we've all experienced this. You find yourself in those situations. Somebody says something to you. Maybe it's even like a conflict, some kind of argument. Somebody says something to you, and what do? Like, without even thinking, you lash back out. Like, oh yeah, yeah. You say, I'm gonna get the upper hand here. Like, I got an even better one. And what happens when you do that? It's just retaliated, isn't it? It's just returned. And so your hurt goes back, and then your hurt is just returned back to you. And again, it just goes on and just becomes this cycle. It gets worse and worse. You get worse. Right? You realize what's happening in those moments. It's like you are actually becoming a worse person. Right? You're I mean, it sounds kind of extreme, but what really is happening in a moment like that is you are part of making this world a hard and horrible place to live in. Again, that sounds extreme, but I mean, and just even in your little micro world, that's what's happening. You're making it a harder place to live in, and the cycle just goes on and on. And so if you want to stop the cycle, if you want to be a part of the solution instead of the problem, as followers of Jesus, one of our goals, one of our aspirations is to have a redemptive presence in this world. If you want to have a redemptive presence in the world, you're going to have to forgive. Right? You have to forgive. And let me tell you what happens. You know what forgive means? It means that when you want to even the score, you don't. It means when you want to make them pay, you don't. When you want that person to feel the same thing that you felt and even a little bit more, you don't. And look what happens in that very moment. The very moment that you want to do something and you stop yourself from doing it. You know what happens in that very moment? It will be suffering. It'll be suffering. Right? Dietrich Bonhoeffer actually talks about this. He says, forgiveness is always a form of suffering. Why? Because you are absorbing the debt. That's what he's getting at. He's saying, instead of making them pay, you're paying the price yourself. You are taking the pain into yourself instead of passing it back, retaliating again and again and again. You pay the price instead of making them pay the price. What is that? That's substitutionary sacrifice. That's what it is. You see, all life-changing love is substitutionary sacrifice. And sacrifice is at the heart of all real love. It's always there. Anyone who's ever loved you that way, anybody who's made like any type of great impact on your life or effect on your life, whether it was a parent or as a teacher or a mentor or a coach or a friend or a spouse, all of them sacrificed in some way. They stepped into your life. They took upon some hardship onto them so you wouldn't have to do it yourself. Now, if that's true, if we know that's true in all these other relationships in life, in every other relational dynamic, if we see that to be true in all of those other relationships, does it not make sense then that a God who is way more loving and way more gracious than any of us ever could possibly be ourselves, a God who comes into this world to deal with the ultimate sin, the ultimate evil, the ultimate problems in our lives, does it not make sense that he would also make a substitutionary sacrifice? Of course it does. Like, even us, as flawed human beings, we know that you cannot just overlook evil. right? It cannot just be dealt with, removed, or healed by saying, forget it. Just forget it. Let's just move on. That's not loving oftentimes. That's neglect. And that's exactly why here Jesus is saying in verse 45, I've come to give my life as a ransom, as a substitute in place of you for your life. See, Jesus did not want to just pass the debt back to us. He absorbed it himself. So why did Jesus come? That's our question, right? Why did Jesus come? He came as a substitutionary sacrifice. The only way that he could redeem us is because he had to come and give his life as a ransom for many, because that's the only way that evil can ultimately be dealt with. That's the only way that our sin can ultimately be dealt with. God couldn't just say, okay, I forgive everybody and anybody. Let's just forget about it. No, he said, no, I'm actually going to deal with it. In fact, that's what we all desire, even in our own lives. Like when we think about the horrible things that have been done by us, or even the things that have been done to us, we see, all of us can see so clearly and recognize we want that to be paid for. We want something to be done about it. And Jesus sees all the same things as well and says, I'm the one who will do something about it. I will step in and cover it and absorb it and take it upon myself and pay that price. It has to be covered. It has to be paid for. That's our most important question. Why did Jesus come? Now, here's what I was maybe feel like I have to say this morning for some of you. Like, maybe you're in a place where it's like, I've been kind of exploring what I believe. I mean, exploring the Christian faith, and I'm not entirely sure what it is that I believe right now, but I've been asking the questions and I've been curious about who God is. And I'm just, what do I do next? And I would just so lovingly, kindly say to you this morning, you believe this, that Jesus died for your sin in place of your sin. Instead of you paying the price, he took it upon himself. He shouldered that sin. He went to the cross. He died as a substitute in your place so that you could have life. And if you believe that, if that is true, then you just walk forward in faith and say, you know what? I'm going to believe that. I want to orchestrate the entirety of my life around that reality that Jesus died in my place. That's what it means to be a Christian. Now, secondly, if that's the first question, why did Jesus come? Secondly, what is true greatness? What is true greatness? What does it mean to be great? Verse 35. And James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came up to Jesus and said to him, Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you. That's a pretty courageous question to ask Jesus right after he's like, I'm about to die. Can you imagine? Sometimes you read things like this, and you see the disciples, and you're like, man, it feels like you guys lack total awareness, right? And you just come into the room and you're like, I'm about to die. You're like, you know what? I've been thinking, will you do for me whatever I ask right now? It's like almost like a little kid asking a parent. And Jesus, he's so gracious. Look at what he does. Verse 36, he said to them, what do you want me to do for you? All right, what do you, let's play this out, right? And they said to him, grant us to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left in your glory. Now, what are they saying? They're saying, we want to be recognized for being close to you. We want to be recognized. We want we want to share in your glory. Jesus, whatever fame or prestige that you're about to get, Jesus, we want to share that. We want some of that too. And what does Jesus say? Verse 38. Jesus said to them, you do not know what you're asking, right? You have no idea. Look at what they say here. We want to share in the glory. I think about what's happening here. We want whatever you're about to get. And Jesus, you can just tell he's thinking hey, I'm about to go to the cross, right? I am about to go die. In fact, we would look at that and say, as Christians, where's one of the most obvious signs of Jesus being put on display in all of his glory? It's a crazy thing that we believe, but it's at his death. It's when he is suffering on a cross, naked, beaten, mocked, hanging there. We say, that is our King in all of his glory, suffering for his children. And the disciples are like, yeah, we want to be there on your left and your right when that happens. He's like, you don't know what you're asking. What does he say? He says, are you able to drink the cup that I drink or be baptized with the baptism with I am baptized? In other words, what Jesus is saying, you have no idea what you're asking. I'm getting ready to go suffer for the sins of the world. That's what he means by the cup and the baptism, right? He's saying, I am about to drink the cup of God's wrath. I am about to go under the baptism. I'm going to be immersed in God's judgment as a substitutionary sacrifice in your place. And the disciples are all like, oh, we're just trying to get a little bit of status, right? From being like in the inner circle. Have you ever been in the inner circle before? Or maybe a better way to ask it is, have you ever like been on the outside and see the inner circle? Right? Like we've all experienced, it's like, oh, that's where like all the power is. Right? That's where all the decisions are. That's where all the fun is. Like you see it from the outside, you looking in. And here we stand on the outside, and it's like, man, if only I could get in there, everything would be different. That's what James and John are jockeying for in this moment. They're hoping somehow if they make the ask, they'll be able to break into the inner circle and get all the glory and status as a result. And what happens when they do this? Like the 10 other disciples hear about it. What does it say? They get indignant. All right, they start fighting. In fact, most people think that they're not upset actually that James and John made the request. Like, you guys were so prideful. We can't believe that you would go do that. No, most people think actually that they're just upset that James and John beat him to the punch. And they're just like, we all want that. We're all craving that. We're all craving that kind of status and glory. Either way, look what Jesus says here, verse 42. And Jesus called them to him and said to them, you know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles, he's talking about just unbelievers, talking about people who don't believe, lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you, but whoever would be great among you must be your servant. And whoever would be first among you must be a slave of all. And then look what he says here. He says, I've come, the Son of Man, right? King of Kings. I've come not to be served, but to serve and to give my life as a ransom for many. You know what Jesus is doing here? And it's very interesting because if you notice, he doesn't squelch their ambition for greatness, does he? What does he do? He just like redirects it. He redefines it. He gives them like a new target. He doesn't condemn them for wanting to be great. He says, okay, if you want to be great, actually kind of a way you can think about this. He's like, okay, if you want to be great in the eyes of the world, we know how to do that, right? That's why he gives us that example there of the Gentiles. He's saying, man, if you want to be great in the eyes of the world, just go dominate people. Just go take advantage of people. Just go leverage every relationship in your life right now and just ask, okay, how can I use you to be able to get ahead in my own way? Right? You've seen this play out. It's gross, isn't it? All right, how do I use you? And how do I even kind of fake my way through that friendship, like helping you believe that I actually care about you when in fact all I want is try to get myself ahead? He's like, that's the way of the world. Right? You want to be great in the eyes of the world? That's what you do. Just go do that. Fine. We all know what that feels like, right? You think about any toxic relationship that you've ever been in. I mean, what's always true? You kind of end up feeling like an object, right? You feel used. Some of you have felt that personally. Some of you not have only been on the receiving end of that. Some of you, if you're being honest, you know that it's been your fault. You've been the one perpetuating that in a relationship, and the criticism at some point that's vocalized is, you're just making me feel used. I mean, honestly, this is not just true in toxic relationships. This is going to be true in any relationship, right? I mean, any relationship you have with a friend, with a spouse, with a partner, anybody like that, when that friendship goes through a lull, like all relationships do at some point, right? You find yourself in a lull of a relationship when the love is not as strong or the romance is not as strong as it once was. What's typically the common denominator? I don't feel appreciated. Right? I don't feel valued. I feel used. I don't feel like an object of your love. I just feel like an object. So if you want to be great in the eyes of the world, that's how you do it. But if you want to be great in the eyes of God, if you want to be first in the eyes of God, here's what you do. You become a servant of all. You become a servant. That's what he says, right? He says literally, you become a slave to all. This is like leadership 101 with Jesus, right? He's like, man, being great in the eyes of God is humbly serving others for the glory of God. That's what it looks like. It's like you take on a posture of saying, "Hey, how do I serve those people around us?" Now, here's maybe one way to think about this because um, one way is to be able to ask the question: "It's like, what does it look like to be great in the eyes of God?" It's like that you're taking on this posture of being a servant. You're looking at other people in your life around you and saying, "Hey, how do I make life a little bit easier for you?" Again, you're just thinking about some of the dynamics of the relationships that God has put in your life right now. Maybe the people that you live with, people that you work with, people that you're just surrounding, neighbors, and whoever it might be. You're taking the posture, looking at them and saying, "Hey, how do I make life easier for you right now?" And what can be a really hard world, right? How do I lift the burden a little bit? Now, I think that's a great starting point, is for you just to be asking the question, what does it look like to serve this person? How do I make it life a little bit easier for you? Now, I think maybe even a better way to take that question and advance it a little bit further is to say, not just like, how do I make life a little bit easier for you, but to be able to say, looking at a person in your life that God has placed in that sphere of influence that He's given you, saying, hey, how do I help make life a little bit easier for you so that you can actually fulfill the very purposes that God has placed in your life? Okay, now that's a little bit of a twist on that, isn't it? Because now you're beginning to identify, hey, what are the things that God has put on your like what are the different ways that God has called you to advance the ministry of the gospel through your personal skill set? Think about that. Like think about some of the people in your life right now. If you're able to say, hey, if you're able to have a conversation about this with a person. Hey, you know what? I've kind of seen God at work in your life in this way. How do I help serve? How do I help make that easier for you to do the very things that God's called you to do? That could be, there's a couple ways to think about this. That could be somebody in your life right now that you're looking at and you're like, man, I am so clearly seeing God do this in you. How do I get behind that and help you do that? Do more of that. It could be also be, I think the reality, probably a lot of us are thinking about like, well, I know there are people in my life that believe in Jesus, but I don't maybe see like the Lord at work right now in them. Maybe it's asking the question, how do I serve that person in a way so that the Lord can really begin working? Like, how can and some of you will actually know the very way that you could do this. How can I help my husband? How can I serve my husband right now in such a way that the Spirit of God might start moving him in a new way? How can I look at my kids right now and say, you know what, I want to love you, I want to serve you in such a way that the Lord might just start doing something because of the way I serve you? Some of you probably have friends right now that are not followers of Jesus, they don't believe. You can ask the question, hey, what would it look like for me to start serving you so that that would begin giving rise to faith? I want to serve you. I want to put the gospel on display. I want to see how Jesus served us. I want to do that in your life so that maybe that will begin cultivating faith. You will start believing. You will see your need for a savior because of the way that I'm serving you. This is what it means to be great in the eyes of God. You become the type of person that people just can't help but notice, like, wow, like that person loves to serve. Like they are the type of person who just loves to give and give and give, and they serve others and they love to do it. It's the very opposite of the way the world tends to think today, isn't it? All right, the number of people who you interact with and we all interact with on a normal basis that just seem to carry a sense of entitlement, right? I deserve this. I've earned this. That's kind of exhausting being around people like that, isn't it? It's like, man, it's draining. But you get around somebody who just loves to serve, right? You get around somebody who just loves to be like, man, how can I help out? How can I make life easier for you? How can I help you do the very things that God called you to do? Man, you get around people like that, it is so life-giving, isn't it? It's like, man, I want to be around people like that more often. It becomes contagious. How do you define great? I love what Martin Luther King Jr. said. He said this in one of his famous speeches. He said, everybody can be great because everybody can serve. He was a preacher, right? He also knew, he was like, man, this is what it looks like to be a follower of Jesus. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and your verb agree to serve. It's been a long time since I've thought about that. You don't have to know about Plato and Aristotle to serve. You don't have to know Einstein's theory of relativity to serve. You don't have to know the second theory of thermodynamics and physics to serve. Apologies to all of you engineers there. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love, and you can be that servant. I mean, here's the best news. about the gospel of Jesus Christ. The gospel tells us that Jesus doesn't tell us just to become servants and then leave us and tell us to try harder, right? What does he do? He first serves us. He looks at proud, ambitious, self-centered people like James and John, people like you and me, and he says, all right, I'm going to take your place. All right, I'm going to go in your place as a substitute. I'm going to pay your debt. I'm going to give my life to set you free. Literally, to free you to serve. The gospel of Jesus Christ does not say if you serve, God will love you more. No, the gospel is Jesus Christ in our place. That's it. He was condemned so that you could be forgiven. Right? He drank the cup of God's wrath so that we could drink the cup of God's blessing. Right? He was baptized with the baptism of God's judgment so that we could experience the baptism of his grace. And when that love begins to get down deeply into your heart, when you begin to own that and feel that, it changes the reason that you serve. Right? You no longer have to serve to prove that you matter, to earn recognition, or to get into the inner circle. Right? That's not why we serve one another. When you encounter the love of Jesus Christ in the gospel, when that becomes real to you, then and only then are you able to serve, not from a self-serving place of how can this benefit me? It's only as an outpouring and as a reflection of the very thing that Jesus has done for us. I mean, that's the thing that I think eventually changed James and John and all the other disciples. They did not remain self-seeking, glory-seeking men. Now what happens? Jesus ransomed them like he ransoms us. Right? Jesus changed them like he is in the process of changing all of us. And then he used them. He set them free to serve. And that's the very thing that he's calling all of us to do even today, is to look at your life, to look at the gospel first, and then to look at your life and say, how has the Lord Jesus called me to serve? What does it look like for me to use my life as a servant, to be a slave to all, and then pursue greatness? Why did Jesus come? He came as a substitutionary sacrifice. What is true greatness? It's the one who says, I long to serve. And so we're going to move into our time of response now in just a second. As we do that, my prayer for us is that even in this moment, this would be a time that God is opening our eyes to be able to ask, what does it look like for me today, this week, to be more and more of that kind of servant, to take that posture and to run with it. So let's pray. Father, oh God, we just thank you that you that you love us so much, that you did not let us stay in our sin, you did not let us stay in the evil of this world, but you actually sent your son Jesus as a substitutionary sacrifice. God, that is our greatest need in this life. Whether we recognize it or not, that's our greatest problem, that's our greatest need, and Jesus is the one who comes to fix that. And so, Father, I pray today that we would just believe that and believe that more fully. And that would be the very thing that liberates us to serve in the way that you have served. That you did not come to be served, but you came to serve. And God, that reality, that example, that model would be the very thing that melts our hearts, transforming us from men, transforming us from women who look inwardly, who only ask what's best for me, what serves me, what benefits me. It transforms our hearts into men, into women. They say, how can I be more like Jesus, who came not to be served, but to serve? I just want to serve one another for the glory of God. Father, I pray that you would do that in us today. I pray that you would just continue to highlight those areas of our hearts that need to be transformed by your grace. And so we ask that you would come, that you would do that now. Lead us now into this time of response by the power of your Spirit. And we pray these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.